Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Somewhat Scholarly. My name is Alan Hibbard, and today I have a very special guest, the CEO of Salucorp, Aaron Day. Mr. Aaron Day, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad we could connect because Twitter is full of crypto talk, and you seem to be like the main guy for Ravencoin, the absolute biggest one. So we got to talk about Ravencoin. We got to talk about Salucorp, and we got to talk about whatever else is on your mind. So you tell me, what is the number one thing you want to start with today?
Well, I mean, Ravencoin is always the top of mind, and in fact, it's interesting. I started Salucorp to try to apply blockchain technology to the healthcare sector, and in doing my research, kind of found Ravencoin and ended up spending and directing all of my time on Ravencoin. So that's kind of what Salu has become. So built some mining rigs and just started out as an educational process, and then kind of fell in love with the project, with Ravencoin itself. So I'm spending most of my time right now promoting Ravencoin, and also talking to various companies that are building projects on Ravencoin. I'm actually doing an interview tomorrow, my first interview, and I'm going to do a series because there are a lot of actual businesses building on Ravencoin, but no one knows that. So I want to kind of do profiles to show the breadth of what you can do with Ravencoin.
Okay, super cool. Yeah, it's all connected. It
is all connected. It's a weird how I got to Ravencoin, but it makes perfect sense in the long term.
Okay. Well, yeah, let's actually work backwards then and start with sort of the vision for the company, Salucorp, and what you're trying to do with healthcare. And then maybe that will help me and viewers understand why Ravencoin is the best platform to build on. So what are you trying to do with the company?
Well, what I wanted to do, so I'm a serial entrepreneur. I started my first company 25 years ago. And it's interesting, during the dot-com boom, I actually started a dot-com company in 1995. So it's really weird having gone through that from 95 to 2001 and then watching what's going on right now. It's amazing how few lessons are learned, right? Like we are repeating all of the cycles over and over again. So my first company was an e-commerce company, sold it in 2001. Then I got involved in venture capital for a short period of time. I'm not a huge fan of the venture capital space. And then I started a healthcare company called Tangerine Wellness, which provided financial incentives to reward employees for improving their health. So we would work with corporations, and we had clients in 43 states. It was a very profitable business. Basically, we were taking the healthcare savings from improving people's health and then sharing that, amongst the employee, the employer, and our company. And that company was basically wiped out of existence because of Obamacare and Dodd-Frank. And so when that happened, I went from, I guess I would say the statement, hell hath no fury like an entrepreneur scorned. And so then I went down a really long path into political activism, which involved being the CEO of the Atlas Society, as you mentioned at the very beginning here, which is a nonprofit based in DC that promotes Ayn Rand's philosophy of objectivism. So when I was there, we were involved with the production of the movies, the 3 Atlas Shrugged movies, and that was kind of an interesting thing. I moved to New Hampshire to become part of the Free State Project. I don't know if you're familiar with the Free State Project.
Yeah, I am. Vaguely, I've seen like a documentary on it. Super interesting. Yeah.
Then formed a super PAC and got very politically active with a couple of different organizations. We helped to get 100 people elected at the state level in New Hampshire. And then I ran for United States Senate. I ran for governor because I still thought you could fix the political process. So I was still I still had hope, and I guess I would say wanted to give it my best effort to see if you could fix it. And you can't. That's the short form of it. But in the process, it was a really interesting process. I ran for U.S. Senate to cost Kelly Ayotte her U.S. Senate seat in New Hampshire. And it's kind of a long story, but basically the state of New Hampshire ended up adopting Obamacare Medicaid expansion, specifically to help Kelly Ayotte win re-election to the U.S. Senate, because the top people on the Republican side. And I said, listen, if you're going to interfere with the state stuff to help further the careers of 1 or 2 people at the federal level, then I'll just interject and ruin your federal race. So I ran as an independent, and I got I think 17,000 votes. It was the closest election. It was the spread was only a few thousand votes. So it basically cost her the election. And it was the most expensive U.S. Senate race per capita in U.S. history at that point. Well, then I got in a bunch of lawsuits because of this. I got sued for $280 million. And I spent 4 years in litigation, which most people don't know this. I haven't even talked about this because this just wrapped up. This is from the 2016 election. It was just wrapped up 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. And no one really knows about this. I actually just haven't really talked about it. I didn't want to bring people into it. And so, long story short, after having gone through this process, I'm like, you can't do anything with politics. Because even though it cost her the election, she knew, and everybody in the Republican Party knew what I was doing. I articulated the strategy. And in fact, I think they probably thought I wasn't going to go through with it. Because like, who is going to go and get the signatures to get on the ballot, to be an independent candidate and do all this other stuff? And in fact, I recruited candidates for governor and both of the congressional seats as well. We cost the Republicans every congressional seat that year. Our independent slate was the margin of difference for all of those seats. And they should have known I would do this based on my previous activism, but it didn't change anything. Even though we did that and I followed through on what I said I was going to do, it didn't change anything. So I then kind of said, all right, I'm out on politics altogether, and realized that at this point, the only thing you can really do is separate money and state. I mean, that's really the only path. It doesn't matter whether you're Republican or Democrat or Libertarian. I mean, I ran as an independent. The first thing that I tried in 2014 was Liberty Republican path. So I was actually the chair of the Republican Liberty Caucus of New Hampshire. In 2016, I tried the independent path. In 2018, I ran for governor as a libertarian. So I've even explored the different models there, and there's just no hope, because if you look at it, whatever successes people claim to have on the Liberty Republican side, all you have to do is look at the size of government. To me, it's very simple. Is the size of government increasing or decreasing? And from the standpoint of New Hampshire, is the control of the federal government at the state level increasing or decreasing? And what's happened even in New Hampshire is, so it all comes down to solvency and sovereignty. And on both of those two dimensions, New Hampshire has fallen off a cliff, even though people will give you this laundry list of Pyrrhic victories of small things. It's like, oh, now you can light off fireworks, you can do this small thing. But in the meantime, 30% of our budget now comes from the federal government. And, with the lockdowns and everything else, what we've really seen is that it's not a grassroots from the bottom up state. It's controlled by the federal races and by kind of the people at the top and in the Senate, not in the House and not at the grassroots level. And so with that said, I'm 100, I didn't even vote in 2020. So, I went from running for office and running these organizations to literally, I will not place any attention or energy on the political process at all. I don't want to feed it any energy or any money. And it's all about 100% moving into crypto, which I think what blockchain does, the right blockchains, if it's proof of work, if it's truly decentralized, is it cuts out the middleman and it provides freedom, economic freedom and liberty on a global basis. It's the biggest invention probably in human history. I think it's an even bigger invention than the Magna Carta or the US Constitution, that was a big upgrade for civilization. But I think blockchain takes it to a whole new level. So I am now 100% dedicated to promoting blockchain, but specifically the aspects of decentralization. And that's how I came to Ravencoin.
Wow, there is so much there. Holy cow. we could talk about any of those things. And my personal experience for folks who know me is straddling the industries of education and finance. And I tried to change those from the inside until I realized that the systems are broken and I'm out. And sounds like it was similar for you in politics. And maybe that leads us to healthcare now. Is the healthcare system too broken to fix, whatever that means, or what can be done about it?
It's absolutely too broken to fix. Here's the interesting thing. The first point of this is 70% of healthcare costs can be addressed by people changing lifestyle and behavior. So we're talking about healthcare. I mean, this is actually, I've looked at the actuarial data and everything else. This was the whole basis of my company, Tangerine. We would put together all these models. It's like if you get people to lose weight, reduce stress, and all these other things, literally it's 70% of healthcare costs. Well, we spend now as a nation 20% of our GDP on healthcare. So, I mean, this is massive. So what we're talking about here is we could impact and improve 14% of the GDP of the country by people just being proactive with the management of their own health. The health insurance system and the healthcare system is not set up, and the incentives are not aligned in any way, shape, or form to improve people's health. That's not how people get paid. That's not how doctors get paid. That's not how hospitals get paid. Health insurance, I mean, I could talk for probably 3 hours about health insurance. People don't know how health insurance works, but it's one of those things where if you said we're in 2021, the health insurance business is one where they make money by being inefficient with the processing of payments. So in other words, they collect premiums and pay out claims, and that lag time, they make interest on that. And that is the number one source of earnings for insurance companies. So you just think about that for a second. That is like mind blowing, right? And it's still like this. My mom passed away in 2012 and she had cancer and she didn't have insurance. So I was managing all of her doctor stuff. And I was able to pay cash at a 50 to 60% reduced rate because literally the hospitals and the healthcare organizations, they get paid by the insurers on a 90 or 120 day basis. I mean, literally, even though they're charging massive amounts for these procedures, insurance companies often have a process where they will just randomly reject a certain number of claims as well, just to go through the adjudication process to float on the money that much more. So that's actually how it works. The other thing is, though, you have no price transparency. So you have different schedules, different fees, different costs, and you can't find out what it is in advance. I just took my kids to Florida for spring break, and we came back and they wanted to go back to school. They didn't want to sit out for 2 weeks. So we went to do the COVID test so that they could get back at it more quickly. Well, because they weren't showing any symptoms, I'm sitting there, I've got the insurance card. They run the insurance, they have the insurance card. And I said, well, does the insurance cover this or not? And they're like, well, we won't know until we process it through billing for like a month. So I may have to pay $175 for each of, I have twins, so I have $350 for these tests or not. I won't know for a month. That's how this works. You can't get the schedule of information in advance. There's also no transparency about the quality of health insurance. And doctors don't like to be rated. I mean, think about this. What other product I bought a computer, I bought a monitor, whatever I buy anything, I look at the customer reviews. I look at editors' reviews, but I value customer reviews even more. And can you get that with insurance? You can't actually get that with insurance. You can't get, and with doctors, look up a doctor. Like Google your doctor, and you'll find these like half-ass sites that provide minimal information. There's literally no transparency at all with the entire system. But what I found is nobody wants to improve the system, and that's the bigger issue. There's not an incentive for this. There's an interesting movie that just came out on HBO I watched yesterday. I think it's called The Greatest Crime of the Century or something like that. It's basically about the opioid crisis and the Sackler family and OxyContin. They actually walked through how they had to have a sales force going out and whining and dining doctors to try to get doctors to use Oxy for purposes other than its initial intended use, which was for cancer patients that were in extreme pain. And they were like, I mean, it's just amazing to see the amount of volume that they were pushing through this. And in the end, there was like a $600 million fine, which they made $9 billion on this drug. So the $600 million fine isn't a big deal. And they managed to bypass any criminal liability. And that's par for the course. That's how most of this actually works. So I don't want to, well, then there's another aspect of this. So when I started Salud, my idea was just skip insurance. Let's have people pay directly. Let's use crypto. So you solve this problem of 90 to 120 day payments if you actually had healthcare providers providing transparent pricing, and then you could actually immediately fund it. And then you could actually take a crypto and then you could form smart contracts and different pools and everything else. All of that's technically possible, and it will legally not be allowed to happen because every state has an insurance commissioner. And the insurance commissioners set very specific rules. So, I mean, as I said, the insurance companies make money by delaying payments and not being transparent. But there's an added component to this, which is they really don't have much control on what they can charge either, because the states and insurance commissioners will say you can only charge a maximum of a 2x difference between groups or between people within a population. You must provide this type of service. Furthermore, they say you have to retain a certain amount of reserves to pay the claims. So if you don't retain enough money, if you don't collect enough premiums, then they'll shut you down. If you collect too much in premiums, which they've done in Massachusetts and other states, they will come in and do a windfall profits tax and charge up to 50% of the excess premiums that they have. So like the whole thing, there's no room for innovation. And these insurance commissioners, they will shut you down immediately. Like this isn't a joke. They will protect the existing structure because it's all interwoven in a way between Medicare and Medicaid and everything else where it's all flimsily financed. And if they don't keep this Jenga thing going and somebody comes in and upsets the apple cart with innovation, then the whole thing collapses. So bottom line is no, I don't want to spend time dealing with bureaucrats or insurance commissioners. And this comes back to starve the beast, separate money from the state, and then they're not going to be able to even enforce these laws, right? I mean, let's face it, these unjust and immoral laws, no one is enforcing these out of a sense of patriotism or they think that it's moral or it's the right thing to do. They're doing it because they're getting paid, right? So if you actually take away their money, then a lot of things will free up and a lot of new opportunities will become available.
Yeah, it's so crazy to me. Like every time I keep hearing about these problems that have been going on, who knows how long, decades, but they're new to me. But it just makes me think like, just like how terrible the corruption is, and how like counterproductive so many of these laws are. It's not like healthcare; it's sick care. It's like preventing people from getting the care they need, and who knows, a lot of like treatments and so forth are probably 100 times more expensive than they should be. I'm guessing, right? I don't have like the math to back that up, but by the time you have all these just crazy rules that people have to comply with, and doctors and hospitals and insurance providers and so forth, between the lag in care, like you said, the 90 to 120 days payment, and just all these compliance things, it's unbelievable. It is the opposite of health. And I think the only reason they get away with it, like you said, I mean, it starts with a broken monetary system, right? That's how it starts, and all the incentives that follow. And then you have a politician that can just say, we're passing a new 500-page law, whether it's state or federal, doesn't really matter, but it's designed, it's a healthcare law, and it's going to improve health for everyone. And who could oppose that? Right? Who could oppose that? We're just, it's going to improve health. This is for the children. This is for the poor people. This is for the diabetics. And then they can require anything that's totally counterproductive. And I feel like that's how we've gotten to where we are now.
Well, it is. And on top of that, the structure, I would say the FDA has killed more people than the Holocaust and all of the world wars combined between their delays and restrictions. And they are in the pocket of big pharma. It's a revolving door within the FDA, just like it is with the SEC and Wall Street. These are not this is the problem. They put out the propaganda to say the FDA is here to protect the consumer. The FDA is there to protect the incumbent biotech companies, just like the SEC is there to protect Goldman Sachs and the existing investment banking structure. They're not, the only thing they're protecting people from is potentially acquiring wealth or health. That's the only thing those two organizations do. And it's very frustrating because they have an incredible amount of power. But the healthcare industry, even the approach that's taken, we're kind of at this point. So as I said, we're now spending 20% of GDP on healthcare, but we've had declining life expectancy like 2 out of the last 3 years. And part of this is we've reached a level where drug delivery and because as you mentioned, the drug companies aren't really curing anything. They're providing predominantly drugs or devices that treat symptoms. There's nothing they don't fix any underlying issue at all. And in fact, they don't have an economic incentive to solve any underlying issues. And there's a lot of stuff going on with quantum physics. And I mean, I've gone way off on the other end of this, where I got into meditation and everything else, where there's stuff that's going on where there are results and you can't even talk about it because the FDA will shut it down. You can't say that anything is a cure or has had it, like even the way that you can present and talk about the information isn't there. So from my perspective, I'm interested in health. I am not interested in healthcare. I don't want to go back and wade into that or spend my time fighting with bureaucrats and politicians. I know how to do that, but it's I guess the best way to say is where you place your attention is where you place your energy. And if you're placing any attention and any energy on the political system or voting or on dealing with the existing healthcare system, then you're giving that your energy, you're giving that your money, you're giving that your resources. I would rather do none of that and just focus on, what's next. At the same time, there are amazing things going on with AI, and we are reaching that point of kind of nearing that singularity where life extension and all of these other things, it's truly possible. It's scientifically possible. And a lot of the stuff is possible now. The only thing restricting it is the government and regulation. And I worry about how long they're going to be able to continue to suppress new technologies and new innovations. But at the same time, I don't want to me, if you've seen some of my stuff on Twitter, I mean, I think that this ultimately breaks down to, we've gotten to the point now where there's more crypto in circulation than US dollars, right? That's a huge milestone. Or when the market cap of crypto hit 2.2 trillion, then there's more in crypto than in US dollars in circulation. That is a huge milestone. But I'm expecting the SEC, I'm expecting the banks, which they already are. I have friends that have had their bank accounts shut down. People don't realize that you don't really own your bank account. Nobody ever reads the agreement when they sign up to get a checking or savings account. They can shut your account down for no reason. There's no cause required. They can seize your funds. They can work with the government. It's just, like I say, never put more money in the bank than you're willing to lose. And that's absolutely the case. So if you're involved in crypto, and I know this is going on in the UK and other places, there are certain banks that won't allow you to deposit excess profits from crypto exchanges. They've literally just cut that off. And if you're, in the pot business, banking is a big issue. Even if you're in a state where it's legal, it's an absolute nightmare. So I think this is going to ultimately come down to an attempted ban on crypto versus a bank run. I think that's going to be the final fight in all of this. It's not going to happen right away, but I think we're moving to that. And so I have no fiat. I have zero fiat, and I've gone from, and like I said, I've gone pretty extreme on this. Like I used to live in a 6,000 square foot house. Everything that I own now fits into 2 suitcases. I don't really care about stuff. I don't ever want to have a house again, to be honest with you. And everything that I have is in crypto, and it's not for the purpose of wanting to cash out to fiat at some point and then buy a whole bunch of stuff. This is more again, it's about that energy where you're placing your attention, and money is energy. And particularly on the crypto side, like that's tangibly the case with mining and so forth. So
dude, totally, man. I'm right there with you. And it's funny. I have some fiat, but it's like a couple $100. And it's funny. I actually just overdrafted the other day by I don't know, $7 or something. And then there was an $18 fee. And I was just laughing because it reminded me of when I was a broke college kid overdrafting out of necessity. And now here I am putting myself in that position to do it all over again while I have, tons of crypto on the side. But you're right, man. Don't put any more money in the bank than you're willing to lose. And in 2015, for anyone listening, I would encourage you guys to do some Googling, because in 2015, the banks and policymakers made it explicit with Title II. They came out and said that, as a depositor, as an account holder, you are the low man on the totem pole if there's ever a problem at the bank, right? Like you don't actually own, this was already established that you don't actually own the account or the money in it. You're the ultimate beneficial owner. So if the bank decides to let you have some money back, you're the last one to get it. And if there's ever an issue with insolvency at the bank, you as a depositor are the last one to get your money back. You'd think you'd be the first one, but you're last.
Absolutely the last.
So it's So be really careful with those banks.
But it's hard. But I'm excited about how many people now understand this, but most people still don't understand how. It's kind of like what I said about healthcare. Generally, what I found is the larger the institution and the older it is, the more corrupt and inefficient it is. And I think most people have a natural reaction to say, well, this is a big industry. It must have gotten here for good reasons, and there must be something behind it that's rational, and it must be like this for good measure. And like you said, education, healthcare, I found the reverse to be the case. But it's this question of how do you educate people? This is one of the things that's challenging about blockchain, which is people have to understand that there's a problem in order to truly appreciate the solution that blockchain is offering. And there's so much that you can unpack and go through on an industry by industry basis. It's like define who the middlemen are, define what the process is like, and then reverse engineer and look at that, and then say, if you could get rid of those middlemen, what would that provide in terms of freedom and economic opportunity? And it's massive, but people almost will look at you sideways when you explain how the banking system works. Like, people don't want to believe that things are as bad as they are. That's actually another thing that I've come across, which is because in a way, if we're in the situation where these institutions are so corrupt and so inefficient, we've been complicit in it by our either lack of knowledge or lack of participation in changing the systems. And people don't want to go to that level. They'll ignore the corruption that's directly in front of their face. So I've seen that. I saw that. That's what the lawsuits that I was in and everything else. Like it's amazing, some of the stuff that's happened. So anyway.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And it hits close to home. Like, so many people don't want to believe how bad it is. My mom has worked in banking her entire life, and she is a sweetheart of a woman. And when I started uncovering these things, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, I started down this rabbit hole. I'm like, hey, Mom, the banks kind of, are kind of stealing basically from everyone all the time. She's like, Alan, I don't know. I'm like, okay, Mom, don't worry about it. She just, she's got a job, and I don't blame her, and she's going to retire in a couple of years and so on. But, these massive problems, like, talk about systemic problems, they take a long time for people to figure out and come around to. And it's like a generational shift. Like, it takes like 20 years or 25 years sometimes for enough people to wake up and for the scales to start to tip. And, maybe we're, 10 years in, if you think of like the birth of Bitcoin, whatever, 10, 12 years, and maybe we've got another 10, 12 years before like something really massive flips. I don't know, but it's going to take a while.
It's going to take a while, but I'm excited. I'm very optimistic about what's going on now. But when the financial collapse happened, so again, I had this very profitable company. I was flying around, meeting with Google, Walmart, it was like this incredible thing. And then instantly the financial collapse happened, and we got Obamacare, and it literally made it illegal for me to offer. This is one of those things about healthcare, right? So they put into Obamacare, you can't offer financial incentives for actual measured improvement. You can only reward people for participation. Literally, that. And our model was based on people actually, we would measure people every quarter and reward them based on improving their health. And that they took that piece of it away. And I'm kind of like, hey, if you're never going to be able to fix it. It's participation trophies within the healthcare system layered in, but that made the thing that I had created that was successful, where people were improving their health, companies were lowering their healthcare costs. We had clients that were on Good Morning America, NBC Nightly News, and everything else talking about a double-digit reduction in their medical claims as a result of our. This is huge. This is a huge deal for companies. This is why we were working with people all over the place. But the government just decides through the process of the drafting of Obamacare that, well, you can't incentivize people to actually improve their health. You can only incentivize them to try. And I'm like, wow, right? So I don't know where you go with that. But I thought during the last financial collapse that we would have made more progress than we did. Even though Bitcoin wasn't around then, the thing that always struck me is, why is there a flight to the dollar when clearly the financial crisis, even from the mortgage disaster, is all tied back, but yet people were pumping and moving to the flight to safety was still the U.S. dollar, and I was scratching my head, like, how is that safe? Nevertheless, that's what it was. But it's different now. I mean, it's clearly different now. What I see on Twitter, the number of people that are like, you know what, I'm going to be my own bank. F these guys. But the volume of people that are doing this. And the one thing that I see within the Bitcoin movement more than anything else, it really is a movement. And I'm seeing this really interesting movement from materialism, away from materialism too, even within the Bitcoin movement. Of course, you'll see people posting their new watches and all this other stuff. You see some of that, but at a broader level, that's not going on. Like at the really high levels, people are not sitting there saying, how can I take my Bitcoin and acquire more material possessions? It's moving away from that. And I like Max Kaiser's Orange Pill podcast. I don't know if you've watched that at all.
Oh yeah.
But he's been talking about some of that recently. And I find that to be a very exciting thing, because it's not just speculation and the number going up and cashing out. There really is a fundamental movement that is based on sound money and freedom. And that is expanding, not quickly enough. I mean, I get discouraged when I see like these Shiba coins and all of this other stuff, because it diverts attention away from the point of the technology. It's like I even posted earlier today, like, how do we get Zoomers to actually understand why blockchain is good, as opposed to just, Safe Moon or whatever it happens to be? I don't have an answer to that, but I'm hoping that, kind of like with the .com boom, you had pets.com and you had all these other flameouts, but in the end, you ended up with Amazon and all these other things. It was very transformational. The same thing is going to happen here. I just hope a lot of people aren't tainted by some of this, bubble, pure speculation, where the projects don't even have an intended use case, right? Like half of these things that are launching now, they don't have any plan to become something. It's like in 2017, it's like, oh, well, here's an ICO, here's a white paper. We haven't actually built anything yet, but we're going to give you some marketing materials. This doesn't even try. They don't even go to the trouble of making up a use case for these coins, other than it's deflationary and the number will go up. And like the biggest scam of this too is like, well, if we create enough coins, then people will see that it's only a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a penny. And they'll look at Bitcoin being, $55,000, $56,000, and this thing is only, 1/10 of a penny. And that's moving. People are moving their energy behind stuff like that. That's a tragedy. But hopefully that will start to shift.
Yeah, it is. And, everyone's got their own lessons to learn. You can't protect everyone. And in 2017, I learned a lot of hard lessons. I bought a lot of shit coins at the wrong time. And, some of them have gone to zero, and some of them are projects that are still around and are higher now, I think, than they were back then. But, everyone's going to learn their own lessons. And it is sad, like on a certain level, but on another level, it's like, people will emerge stronger. People will emerge stronger, and whatever the best projects are will survive, obviously, and in a Darwinian kind of sense. And it's all part of the process to get to utopia. It's silly to say, but like whatever the next phase is, let's put it that way. It's all part of the process.
Well, no, it is part of the process, and that whole creative destruction thing is all part. It's all part of how it works, and so it's great, and it is great to see the pace of innovation. Like even looking at DeFi, I mean, I've played around with it just more to understand it than anything else. But when you start understanding how the traditional financial system works, like I've gone through this process. One of the things that Ravencoin allows you to do is do security token offerings. And so I've gone through the process of studying, which I'm probably not going to do subsequently, but to take that FINRA test to become a securities industry essentials. And what's been useful about studying that is I now know how truly backwards the entire financial system is. I mean, when somebody says I'm a registered financial advisor, they have gone through an indoctrination of a very finite set of financial products, whether it's municipal bonds or government bonds or equities or REITs or whatever. There's like, whatever, the basket of different things and all the different tax implications. But there's not a lot of real innovation that's gone on in the regulated market at all. And some of these financial instruments are completely out of date. And so what goes on with DeFi is truly interesting. Of course, most of it is, it's like you're yield farming on coins that are all self-referential, right? So it's like, okay, well, I've got a coin that's all part of this other ecosystem that's about enabling DeFi, but it's not like, in the stock market, you have market makers, right? And what DeFi does is it creates an automated market maker through a smart contract. But the thing is that that's being used for only speculative coins that are related to the ecosystem of DeFi. But ultimately, if that got applied to actual equities and some of the things that are in traditional finance, it's groundbreaking, and it's something where you see no innovation. One of the things that happened, this whole Wall Street bets movement was phenomenal for Ravencoin, but it was just an interesting thing to watch as well, because people now realize, wait, we have T+2 settlement times. There's one company that owns every stock certificate for publicly traded companies, and they literally physically move the stuff around and settle in 2 days. Like that's the ledger. That's the ledger that the whole multi-trillion-dollar equity system is based on. This is why Robinhood crashed and everything. People, this like healthcare and education, everything else we've been talking about. No one would believe if you said to them that there's one company that has all of the paper stock certificates. There was a flooding on Wall Street, and like $1.7 trillion worth of stock certificates that this DTCC company was holding were destroyed in a flood. It's like, are you kidding me? Is it like, this is really how this works? And it really is how this works. And because that's how it works, the investment bankers create a lot of products and everything, taking advantage of this system where things aren't documented and doing a lot of things over the counter. And it's just like, it's mind blowing that this is how that system works. So.
Yeah, it is ripe for disruption.
It's ripe for disruption, and then these SEC guidelines are all about, well, you can only be an accredited investor to invest in companies. So if you don't have a net worth of $1 million, you can't invest. But then they have these new crowdfunding rules, right? So you can raise up to 5 million, but you still have to go through a registered broker deal, a FINRA registered broker dealer. So if you decided you've got a company and you wanted to raise $5 million, up to $5 million, you can't do that yourself. You have to go through a broker dealer that is licensed by FINRA. That's actually problematic, because what's happened is when you look at the few number of people that are kind of positioned to even do these things, they have like a 1 or 2% acceptance rate. So it's like, okay, I've got a small business. I want to be able to sell equity to small investors. And now there's like 1 or 2% chance that if I apply to these broker dealers, that they'll accept me to go through their portal so that I can then raise money with limits. It's kind of, it's unfortunate, right? Because there's a much better, people should be able to invest in whatever they want to invest in. But again, this is all about protecting VCs. This is about protecting existing institutions. This has nothing to do with protecting the individual investor from loss.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's the complete opposite. So anytime you're forced to take a long time for whatever it is, approval, settlement, anytime you're forced to take time and have an extra cost and, pay for licensing or pay fees for the guy who got his licensing to process something for you, you're just destroying prosperity. And that makes it so much harder for the little guy to, climb the ladder of financial prosperity. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. And when I went through the study guide for this test, one of the things that you're supposed to do as a FINRA registered broker dealer is, if somebody comes to you as a potential client, you have to assess the suitability of the investment. This is the language that they use, which means that if somebody is not a sophisticated investor, their guidelines say, if somebody wants to protect their principal, you're supposed to say to them that government bonds and municipal bonds are safe. Like, that's literally in the materials. And this is part of why I can't take this test, because I don't believe that. I believe that not that in going through the process and taking the test, I would be serving in a role of sitting down with people and helping them manage their money. The only reason I go through this process is so that I can have a portal to do crowdfunding, right? But I can't in good faith tell people that it's safe to put your money in government bonds or municipal bonds. I don't believe that that's true. And I think we're at a fundamental shift. We've been in this, the United States has been in this protected position since World War II. I mean, we came out of World War II, we didn't have all of this debt. So the dollar became the standard. So it was just a fortunate set of circumstances. And then we were on the gold standard, and then we blew that up, but yet we still have this reserve, we're still the reserve currency, and we're doing everything that we can to debase and destroy that as much as we have. But if you talk to anybody in the financial services industry, they still have the same mindset of things are going to be the same way that it's the post-World War II, the United States in this dominant position, and this is the way that it's going to be forever because that's the way that it's been for the last 30 years. Well, that's not how this works. This is a black swan event. This is a complete shift in how the financial markets are going to work, which is why I could never be a registered, I couldn't in good faith push their propaganda. But I mean, I would also tell you, I think homeownership is one of the biggest scams. If you look at an amortization table for a mortgage, I mean, if you propose something like that, even as an ICO, people are saying ICOs are scammed. You don't get to the point where you're paying the same in principal and interest in a 30-year mortgage until you're 222 months into the mortgage. So in other words, you're front-loading interest for 222 months out of a 30-year mortgage. Who thinks that's a good financial instrument?
Yeah, you know why it's called a mortgage? Like it's the same root word as like mortuary. Like it's a death pledge. Like the idea is you pay till you die. That's what it's for. And you're paying for the house 2 or 3 times over, depending on the interest rate, obviously. It's a terrible, terrible idea.
It's a terrible idea. And yet that's been, the propaganda has been that's what the American dream is. The American dream is associated with home ownership. And you've had politicians and banks in lockstep pushing this. And when you walk away and you take a look back and you say, what is this actually all about? It's insane. So anyway, that's, I like seeing the innovation in DeFi, even though the use cases have not quite yet been tangible, other than people rug pulling each other or whales making money. Whatever. But that's the early part of any cycle of development, right? That doesn't mean that it's bad. There's great innovation that's going to come out of DeFi. It's just that there's going to be a lot of silly stuff at the same time as well.
Yeah. And you can't stop people from speculating, right, on prices or whatever, no matter what the asset is.
Wouldn't want to. I mean, again, I buyer beware. Who knows? Who am I to say what anybody should buy or sell at any point in time for any reason?
Hey, you know what? What if we got like a bunch of guys to help us regulate crypto so people could only buy it if it was safe for them?
Yeah.
Some guys who are really smart and they know what's dangerous and what's safe, and they could tell us, so we don't have to do any thinking for ourselves. That would be
so we have this new SEC chairman, Gary Gensler, and there are a lot of people that are like, "Oh, this is great. He understands blockchain because he taught a class at MIT on blockchain." Well, I watched his MIT class. This guy is he understands blockchain. He is not a friend of blockchain. He's ex Goldman Sachs. He was Hillary Clinton's CFO of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign, and in that position decided that it wasn't safe to take Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, right? So to be clear about where this guy is, he's already said that he thinks Ethereum is a security. He's on video saying that, and they've already stalled the Bitcoin ETFs because there are a lot of people who are saying, "Oh, well, I heard that he understands this. He taught a class at MIT." That's the worst thing that you can have, is somebody that understands something and doesn't like it. Right. So I don't expect positive things. Well, we haven't seen positive. We're already seeing negative things out of him. But that's just fun. We can persevere, and I think blockchain will win. People just need to not get too caught up in the fear.
Yeah, well, that's the beautiful thing about blockchain, is that it doesn't matter what the regulations are. I mean, it does to a point, depending on your own personal ethics and whether or not you want to be a dissident or so forth. But aside from that, it's a big thing to just kind of put aside. But like, the code is the code, right? You can't stop people from using it. You can say that you're a criminal if you use it, But I mean, that some people are going to say, fine, call me a criminal. But there's a million other people using it and try to catch all of us. And, it's just so much better for us to live our lives, and we're not trying to hurt anybody. um, you know, Everyone's going to make their own decisions like that. So, the regulations can certainly slow adoption, but it can't stop it altogether. So.
No, it can't. But I expect a whole bunch of different things. Like we see this in other countries where between the KYC, AML stuff, and then I wouldn't be surprised. I'm going to say this here, where they'll pass a law that says you can't self-custody your own crypto. You have to go through a bank. I completely see that happen. They will try to do this, which is why what I try to say to people all the time is, don't fiat buy crypto, but get it off of the exchange and figure out all of what that means. Because I know a lot of people that have lost a lot of crypto on exchanges, but I mean, it is fundamentally a centralized process. It's worse than a bank actually in many respects, because you don't even have fake recourse.
Yeah.
I mean, you have FDIC insurance, right, with a bank, which is good up to a certain point. Although when you see how much FDIC actually has in reserves, if there was an actual problem, FDIC doesn't actually have the capacity to handle that much. But nobody thinks about that. It's kind of like in the last financial collapse. They bailed out AIG because they realized, well, wait a minute, AIG provides life insurance and all. So if AIG goes, it takes out all this other stuff, and nobody thinks about the idea that an insurance company can go broke. They just don't think about it. So they'll do that. And they will make the on ramps difficult. They will make the off ramps difficult. Banks will make it more difficult for you to convert. The reporting will go up, which is why the other thing that I try to do is buy as much stuff in crypto directly that I can. I mean, I will go out of my way to use crypto directly for peer-to-peer transactions, because the more people get into the habit of doing this. But what we've seen in Venezuela, Nigeria, other countries, the adoption happens instant. When people have to figure this out, they figure it out instantly. And as much as it's still a little bit cumbersome, necessity will drive adoption very quickly. And I think based on the inflation that we're seeing here now, like we're in hyperinflation now. It's double digits. I mean, they came out and said 4.5%. There's no way it's 4.5%. That's just not even close. And so we're already at that hyperinflation phase, which is another reason not to hold on to fiat. I mean, what are banks offering now? 0.5% interest rate. I mean, this is obscene, right? You are losing wealth with your money in the bank. So it's going to be a very interesting process. The other challenge with it is getting, frankly, older people and boomers to understand this. It's a big challenge, because they have a lot of belief systems and things that they were taught that turn out they just aren't actually true. You know what I mean? Like some of these Ponzi entitlement programs and everything else. Like there was this idea of, well, I work for the same company for 30 years. I have a 30-year mortgage, and then I retire when I'm 65, and then I celebrate my golden years. And all of that's kind of a myth. And that was something that was constructed and was really only applicable during a very short window of time after World War II. But at the same time, these people have oriented their entire life around those set of beliefs. And now here we are. With 30 trillion in debt, 100 trillion in unfunded liabilities, hyperinflation, money printing, and everything else. And now all of this stuff is going to come to a head, or is coming to a head as we speak.
Yeah, I mean, it's so tough for people, and no matter what age. But yes, I would imagine, especially for the older generation, it's so tough to take beliefs that you've held for your whole life, whether it's 20 or 30 years or 50 or 60 years, and then be like, wait a minute, I think it's all a lie. Like it's so hard to even consider the fact that it might be untrue, that, maybe working a job, now that I'm 60 and I'm about to retire, geez, maybe it was a really bad idea to just keep working this whole time and trusting the banks and trust my employer to give me a retirement and trust Social Security and trust all these things. Maybe it's all been a lie. It's so hard to consider that you believed false things your whole life. It's so tough. And I mean, I've spent so many years in my 20s just having these like sleepless nights, really, just questioning my deepest held beliefs and realizing that they are essentially lies. So I don't know. It's very hard to do.
And I went through that. I went through like a big transformational thing like 2 years ago. I guess it's a midlife crisis. When you research this, by the time people are 35, basically like 90% of your day is the same as the day before. You really don't have a lot. You have a lot of like subconscious stuff that's just built in, and you're really on autopilot based on your habits, belief systems, and everything else. And then at some point you realize this is BS. And when you break out of that, it releases a lot of energy, and then you go to a completely different place. Then you're open to kind of exploring other things. But I had that happen with me as well, 2 years ago. And now it's kind of like, wow, okay. So now everything's different. And then I have kids. And so the really big questions about how do you raise kids? What should they be focusing on? Because, there's always this, like, again, along with the home ownership, working for a company for 30 years and everything else, was the notion of, you've got to go to college. The ROI on college to me at this point is more indoctrination, because you're not learning how to think. You're being taught what to think, but what you're being taught to think isn't actually useful. So it's kind of so that's weird. And then you look at where AI is going, and you just say to yourself, well, most of the stuff, truly, most of what people might go to school for job purposes, a lot of that's going to be automated. Most of it's going to be automated. But at the same time, if we have this level of automation and everything else, are people even going to need money? There's a lot of, a lot of stuff that happens at the intersection of blockchain, AI, and everything kind of moving forward and innovation. So so as a parent with 10-year-old kids, it's like, oh, well, what do you do with that? How do you help your kids? How do you enable them to do whatever it is, figure out what it is that they want to do, and help enable them on that path? I spend a lot of time thinking about that.
Yeah, for sure. Me too. And I don't have kids. I have a fiance. We talk about kids all the time, and I'm certainly apprehensive to bring kids into the world, right now. But yeah, I've been a teacher and a tutor and a sort of a college professor, basically. And eventually I had to get out because of what you just said. The curriculum is propaganda. It's all propaganda, and it's indoctrination. It's teaching, although I hesitate to even use that word. It's brainwashing kids to do a certain thing that probably isn't useful in a direct sense, but at the same time, you're weakening their soft skills in so many ways. You're weakening their ability to think critically. And you're weakening their ability to think for themselves and evaluate risk, and to evaluate their own investment in themselves and their investment of their energy, as you mentioned earlier. Like, where you put your attention is where you put your energy, and like that in itself is a message I would love to teach young people, and that's why I have the YouTube channel, because like your energy is your most prized currency, like your energy and your time. And yeah, it's like when I realized I couldn't fix the education system, I had to get out. And it's like, how would I raise kids now? I'm not sure, but I just know that the smallest amount of school possible. That's my answer. The smallest amount of school possible, and anything else they need to know, they'll figure out in life. They'll figure out from YouTube. They'll figure out from hanging out with friends, from socializing, from kids older, from kids younger. They'll figure it out. That's my thought.
That's my thought. Well, so our kids are in Montessori school right now.
Okay.
And I actually got my kids iPads when they were like 2. So I've got like a picture of my son. He's sitting there with his index finger on it. And now, like, I'm watching him play Roblox, and I'm like, wow, you should be a DeFi trader, because he's taking fiat, buying a Robux gift card, then turning that into an alternate currency, and then earning another currency, and then trading in black markets for different digital assets that they're buying. I'm like, you're doing more trading. You've got more actual stuff going on. And he's sitting there saying, he's like, well, they're going to do this black market in the fall. And what I'm hearing in these message boards is, if I hold on to this special weapon that's 60,000 gems right now, it'll be 120,000 gems by fall. And I'm like, dude, you're 10. Like, this is awesome. Like, how do you teach? They're not going to learn that in school.
Exactly. Right? Yes.
It's fast. So I had them last summer, because they were interested in Roblox. I had both my son and daughter take learning how to code, like a 2-week intensive thing on how to code that. So it's stuff like that, but also teaching them that you make mistakes. That's part of life. Like, I see different parenting models, and the ones that work out the worst are the ones where the parents hold this standard where the kid can't make any mistakes or take any risk. And so then what you breed are compliant people, but that are living in fear. And that's a horrible outcome. And so it's all about, once you realize that you learn by mistakes, you don't want to make any fatal mistakes. You just want to kind of protect them at that level. But otherwise, it's like learn and unlearn quickly. And it's kind of like going through that midlife crisis as well. I spent so much time unlearning because that is the big thing. I mean, at this point, I think I still spend more time. It's an interesting ratio between learning versus unlearning. Because once you really start questioning how everything works, then you realize, this is inaccurate, right? Just what we've been talking about, healthcare, markets, everything else, but even all of the stuff that you've learned in school, even various aspects of history, it doesn't even matter what the subject is. It's like, oh, well, here I am thinking I learned this. And in reality, I'm parroting a propaganda belief system that may be completely untrue. So once you start stripping all of that back, and I went through this like 6-month process where I just dumped all of my habits, all of my other processes. I just dumped all of them and then kind of like did this whole introspective thing. And it was a fantastic process. I guess it's still ongoing, but I'm trying to teach my kids, if I can impart any of these lessons to my kids now, then that will be very helpful. The more resilient they are and the more they can learn and unlearn, that's really the powerhouse.
Yeah, big time. I totally agree. Yeah, unlearning is so important, and that's part of the reason I called this channel somewhat scholarly, because it's something like school, but also not like school at all. It's like what school should be. Like there's no homework, there's no grades, there's no penalty for wrong answers, and I don't have any answers. Like I don't have any answers for anybody. It's like you got to come up with your own answers, and then probably let go of them at some point in the future when you learn new information. So so you mentioned, I'm really curious. You mentioned this whole idea of your personal journey, unlearning things, and I think you said about 2 years ago it happened. I'm wondering what was the catalyst for that? Like what happened, and what's the journey been like?
Well, the catalyst for that was I went through this political process and I ended up in $280 million worth of lawsuits and got divorced. And the thing is, so I ended up taking 100% of my net worth and putting it in Ravencoin. And I went from being in a 6,000 square foot house to being in a 12. A friend of mine in Florida had a house. And so I had a 12 by 12 room with me and my dog for 6 months. And it was in this house with 2 other people and kids and everything else. But yet I wasn't bothered by it at all, that was the weird thing about it. So there was the big catalyst was just me saying, all right, I'm leaving New Hampshire. I'm going to Florida for a while, and I'm just going to sort out what's going on. And then, as I said, I was the CEO of the Atlas Society. So that was an organization promoting the philosophy of objectivism. But then I found myself meditating and studying quantum physics. Like it was like a complete shift. So I mean, I'm remarried now, but my wife now has been heavily involved in spirituality. And so she suggested some books and things to me that I would have never even thought about or considered. So I started going down this entire process. So I was down in Florida and I was exercising every day out in the sun, going to a biohacking gym, all this cool equipment. So like the hyperbaric chamber, so it'd be in this like oxygen thing for 90 minutes, all this other stuff, and just really focusing on, reading, meditating, exercising, and all that other stuff. And I didn't have a set agenda. I just let things flow as they flowed. And I ended up in just places that 2 years ago, I would have been laughing at myself. I would have been very judgmental about the stuff that I was doing, but yet at the same time, it was a completely transformational experience. Even ended up like doing Joe, I don't know if you've heard of Joe Dispenza.
Oh yeah. Breaking the habit of being yourself.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And so we did an advanced retreat in Malta for a week. And the amazing thing about that, I mean, we talk about healthcare again. I had gluten allergy, horrible gluten allergy. And I came out of that thing and I can now eat gluten. And by the way, I didn't go there with the intention of even fixing that. Like that wasn't even a thing. I was actually surprised that it happened. And so that was I saw weird healing things from meditation that, again, the objectivist of me 2 years ago would have said, no, that's not, that can't possibly be real. That can't possibly happen. So that was just amazing doing the week-long stuff. And then I've been experimenting with a lot of different things, different types of meditation. Have you heard of Tom Campbell?
No.
So again, I just followed everything to wherever it went. And when I went down to Florida, the first thing I said, well, how do I meditate? Like, how do you meditate? That was like the starting point. So my wife gave me some guidance and everything else. And then I found Joe Dispenza on my own. But then I went down some different paths and then started exploring things like the Monroe Institute. If I don't know if you're familiar with this, it's in Virginia. They do. They've been affiliated with some of these CIA programs for remote viewing.
Oh, okay.
So you go. I haven't gone to this place yet, but you go there, and there's like it's like a week-long retreat, and you practice all kinds of different things, whether it's remote viewing, out-of-body experiences. It's a whole bunch of stuff. And this guy, Tom Campbell, was a nuclear physicist who he got involved in meditation in the late 60s or early 70s, and then found he could get to a state of point consciousness very quickly using binaural beats. And so they started doing all of this like scientific stuff to try to figure out how to get people into these altered states of consciousness. And then he wrote a book called My Big Theory of Everything. And he's basically been for years a proponent of basically the idea that we are kind of living in a simulation of sorts. And he's actually outlined this whole larger consciousness system and has this whole really, like, it's a 3-volume set. But he was really on the cutting edge of that stuff. But the fact that they were doing these meditative techniques from a scientific basis in a controlled way, where they were measuring things and playing around with, frequencies and all this other stuff, I'm like, wow, so I got to like that level. And then I'm like, all right, now then I'm playing around with things like lucid dreaming. And so I've been on a completely different arc it's amazing. Like the remote viewing thing is real. I've done it. I took a Tom Campbell week-long advanced course, and they have this thing where it's like, they'll give you a list of file names. You'll pick a file name, and then you'll meditate. You'll put on these binaural beats, and then you draw what comes to your mind, where you're in that state of point consciousness, related based on just the name of the file. And then when you are done with that meditative session, you look up the image and see what the image was. And so we did like 6 or 7 of those. I'm like, whoa, don't know how it works, but then I've started studying like Russell Targ and a whole variety of different things. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
He gave a TED talk, The Science Delusion, maybe it was called, or maybe I'm confusing him with another guy, but I've seen some of his stuff. Rupert Sheldrake. That's right.
Rupert Sheldrake is another awesome guy who talk about the morphogenic field, and it's like the same stuff. So I got like into this whole thing, and you're the first person that I've talked to about, like, you don't see me posting this stuff on Twitter because I feel like because a lot of the people that I've met over time have come from this other side, like but what I found when I talk to people one-on-one, I'm sensing, this is why I said when I talked about Max Kaiser and everything else, I'm finding people are making shifts. So I haven't found that when I've told people about this, like, man, you're nuts. I've actually found more people are sharing their experiences that are somewhat similar. Like, a good friend of mine for 25 years, apparently he's been meditating for like 10 years, and he never wanted to bring it up to me because he thought I was an objectivist. I'd poo-poo it. And then we started talking about it. It's like, whoa. So like it's just kind of ballooned. So I don't know what to make about all of that, but that's part of the unlearning process, right? And so it's like so when you liberate that energy, when you break the habits that you have, and when you start questioning things, it just opens up your attention and your energy to go into different places. And so I'm now focusing on, well, let's see where that goes with I don't have a predetermined outcome. It's just let's see where it goes. Yeah. And I was the kind of guy that would have a spreadsheet where I would plan out my life for 5 years with like 10 things. And it's like, I don't do any of that anymore. I'm like, I'm out of that.
I'm the same way. I made a spreadsheet for everything. And I used to be a hardcore atheist. And I didn't know about Ayn Rand's philosophy, but I probably would have aligned with it fairly nicely until the last few years, and my journey's been roughly similar to yours in the sense that I'm exploring all these different fields. And it's extremely exciting and almost overwhelming because there's so many different things to explore, so many different paths to go down, but they're all just unbelievably fascinating. They're all interconnected. And just relating it back to, all the different systems that we've talked about are broken, financial and education and healthcare and all that. It's like so many of these pseudosciences, let's call them, are poo-pooed and laughed at, not because they don't work, but because they do work. Like they're a threat to all the incumbent systems, all these alternative medicines and, acoustic healing and, energy meditation and things like the placebo effect, just thinking, what, I'm not going to get a cold. I'm not going to get sick anymore. And that works. Like that works.
It does.
And people think it's crazy. If you really believe it, I'm just not going to get sick anymore. It works. It sounds so crazy. Wim Hof, the Wim Hof.
I did Wim Hof breathing was something that I integrated into this as well. Yes. And Bruce Lipton, because you mentioned this. So what's interesting about this, I mentioned this about kind of like biotech and everything is stuck in this Newtonian world, but the quantum world is really kind of it's now even the cutting edge of science, but the established people don't want to go there because they've invested all this time, money, and everything else into these other belief systems. But what Bruce Lipton has done is they're really starting to be able to explain some of how this works from the perspective of epigenetics, right? It's not that you just have one genetic code and that it's completely determinate. You can express different genes, and literally your thoughts and your attitude can lead to the expression of different genes. They did a study where they took diabetics and they had, for instance, they had them watch a 30-minute sitcom, and they had one group where they measured the blood sugar levels before and after laughing for 30 minutes. And that laughing actually changed and regulated and improved their blood sugar. There are all kinds of studies about this. And so people are like, well, because it's not a Newtonian, because we're not applying a physical process to it, it must not be real. But then once you start realizing, wait, we really do have the capacity to change our own gene expression. So Lipton is actually kind of on the cutting edge of being able to explain, because he came up with epigenetics. Like he's a Stanford, he's got a really interesting, what is his, well, I got to look at it was like a deluge of information. I mean, I probably read 200 books in the 6-month period of time. Like it was, and I couldn't sleep either. So I'm going through this like transformational thing. And it's like, I would sleep I've never slept that much anyway, 2 or 3 hours a night sleeping max. But the whole time I'm like videos, books, meditating, exercise, and just the kind of it all blurs together. But the scientific explanations for some of these things are now becoming available. And it's going to shake up a lot of these fields if it's allowed. Tesla knew about energy healing and energy medicine. And in fact, I read somewhere that Mark Twain had some medical condition, and Tesla actually helped him through some device utilizing frequency, helped Twain where he was unable to get any treatment through any other traditional medicine. And he has patents on some of this stuff. And then that's a whole other scam if you want to talk about it, patents. But there's there's a Secrecy Act or whatever, something like 5,000 patents the government has the ability to come in and take a patent and basically shelve it. And if you, as the creator of the patent, talk about it, it's a minimum 10-year jail sentence. And they have the ability to do this based on whether it's a national security threat or an economic threat, truly meaning, and a lot of these 5,000 patents that have fit into this category have been clean energy. And one of their criteria is if the energy is this much more efficient, it's literally a threat to existing jobs in the energy sector. And they have used that to block the publication and implementation of patents. Like, it's just, and this is the problem that I have with all of this. It's like, talking about any one of these areas, like opening people's minds up to any one of these areas is difficult. And then once you start but once you can get people to question one thing, then the floodgates open and you can't unring that bell, because once you start really saying critically, well, how does this work? Well, how does this function? Instead of just assuming that it's there for a good reason. And then once you that process kicks in, then the world becomes a completely different place. And this is one of the things I've been trying to do with Ravencoin, because Ravencoin allows you to tokenize any asset, whether it's physical or digital, large, small. It could be information. It could be a $500 million sapphire. It could be a building. And it allows you to trade that anywhere in the world, nearly instantly and freely without any middle. That revolutionizes land titling. It literally revolutionized. I sat down at one point as an entrepreneur. I'm like, well, what is the addressable market size of this? And it's literally everything, because every market has middlemen and inefficiencies with it. And there are all these boundaries and things that are constricting trade. So it literally affects everything. But then on top of that, there are new things that can be created that never existed before using this. For instance, there's a guy created something called Ravencoin IPFS, where basically it's like Dropbox, right? Where you can store your files, but they're stored using IPFS. So it's not even using the internet. It's using like a peer-to-peer file sharing system. And you can encrypt these files and use tokens to kind of transfer the files around. Well, it's completely censorship resistant. There's no big tech involved. The government can't shut it down. So, when people thought about, a lot of people thought about Ravencoin initially as, well, people are going to use this for security tokens to trade stocks. But it's like that, to me, the stock thing is like 0.1% of what you can do with Ravencoin. So I've actually tried to run some of these contests to get people thinking about what would you tokenize with Ravencoin, just to get people thinking about the possibilities. And that's why I'm passionate about Ravencoin, because it literally can bring freedom and disrupt every market.
That's pretty cool. So I don't know much about Ravencoin at all. I was expecting to talk about Ravencoin for like an hour or more. Here we're barely touching on it at the end here, which is kind of funny. But okay, so help me understand Ravencoin, maybe by way of comparison to something else, either like a Bitcoin or an Ethereum or something, because I'm thinking, there's 10,000 cryptos out there. Don't a lot of them allow tokenization of assets, or maybe even most? I don't know. Isn't that a very common thing? Like what makes Ravencoin different, and why are you so excited about that instead of some of the others?
Well, so the difference to me is it really is about decentralization and freedom. So as we've talked about all of this, so all of my experiences with government, politics, healthcare, whatever it happens to be, I realize that these middlemen are the problem. Ravencoin at its core, it's a fork of Bitcoin. So so the starting place is it's using Bitcoin, but you can create these tokens on the blockchain without creating smart contracts. So if you want to create a token on Ethereum, you actually have to create a smart contract, have the smart contract audited. You can't have a unique token name. You can have multiple named tokens named the same thing with different smart contracts that can be hacked. It's expensive. All of that, it built into the protocol itself with Ravencoin is the ability to just create tokens. You can create a token in like 60 seconds. Costs 500 Ravencoin to create what's called a main token. So it's like, so if let's say I had a company and I had shares, so Salucorp, for instance, and I had 21 million shares. So I could reserve the Salu token, and I can have up to 21 billion tokens through my main asset. Or you can create an NFT, which is now popular, for only 5 Raven. So, it's like 75 cents. So for 75 cents and in 60 seconds, you can create your own NFT token that can be traded on an immutable ledger on a blockchain that is built off of Bitcoin. And you can do it in 60 seconds for 75 cents. You will not find that in other places. The thing that I like the most about Ravencoin is the project the people behind it are very much committed to liberty and kind of the cypherpunk ethos and decentralization and censorship resistance. And, Bitcoin, they limited the block size, which has created all of these problems. So you can't actually use Bitcoin as cash. It's now only become a store of value, which is not what the white paper says. And, people can talk about Lightning and everything else. That was a arbitrary decision made by developers after the fact, not the ones who created it, but by a group that kind of hijacked it and took it over. So it's lost its ability to be peer-to-peer electronic cash. That's actually not what it is right now. It's a store of value. Ethereum, the problem with Ethereum is moving from proof of work to proof of stake. Well, the whole point of crypto is decentralization. if you get rid of decentralization, I mean, we're just basically going from having war criminal Bilderberg to having nerd Bilderberg with Ethereum, right? It's concentrated with a group of people, and it's slow and expensive. That doesn't make any sense, right? You can't. I tried to use Ethereum to buy crypto. I was like, oh, I'm going to test out this DeFi thing. I'm going to buy $1,000 of this. $274 in gas fees to do $1,000 trade. That is not the future of finance, right? But even if they fix these issues with these second layer solutions, it doesn't change the fact that at the core of Ethereum, it's no longer decentralized. It's moved to proof of stake. So to me, they've lost the plot entirely with Ethereum. So Ravencoin, there will be 21 billion maximum as opposed to 21 million. But every time somebody creates an asset, so when I mentioned that if you reserve an asset name, it's 500 Raven, that gets burned from the total. So it's actually deflationary. So the maximum is 21 billion, but it will actually be less than that based on the number of tokens. The blocks are created every minute as opposed to every 10 minutes in the case of Bitcoin. And we have 2 megabyte blocks currently as opposed to 1 megabyte blocks. But the project is open to expanding. Like we could go with the big block model. And in fact, whether people like BSV or not, they've proven that you can do big blocks. Big blocks are in fact possible. The BSV has the capacity to do large scale transactions on chain without all of these second layer solutions and all of these other things, whether Ravencoin goes down that path or not. The other thing is it is proof of work, but there's a specific algorithm that is used. So Bitcoin uses one algorithm for solving these little cryptographic problems. Ravencoin has like a random set of, I think it's 16 different algorithms. And the reason that Ravencoin has done this is people that are mining Bitcoin or Ethereum, they use ASICs. They use specific hardware that is manufactured just for the purpose of doing these cryptographic problems. But by creating an algorithm like this, you can actually use GPUs, which means that it's truly decentralized. So we have miners all over the world. Anybody can mine even today with a graphics card without having to have special custom hardware, which means that it is even more decentralized. So proof of work is inherently decentralized, but it's one layer beyond that by having this different algorithm for doing the proof of work mining. So to me, it's the most decentralized project out there. And the thing that I am the most interested in, the most passionate about is the decentralization aspect, which is why I'm a big fan of Ravencoin. One of the co-authors of the Ravencoin white paper is Bruce Fenton, who is he's a free stater. So he's here in New Hampshire now, but he was previously the chairman of the Bitcoin Foundation and then was also a stockbroker and learned kind of the light bulb went off with him in, 2012, 2013, about how this blockchain technology could be applied to stocks, to security tokens. And so he took that idea and met up with Tron Black, who's the lead developer, also a strong Liberty guy. And he actually met Tron Black through Patrick Byrne. So I don't know if you're familiar with Patrick Byrne.
Name sounds familiar, but I don't know.
So Patrick Byrne is the founder of Overstock.com.
Oh, yes, of course. Yes. He's been he's had Bitcoin a really long time. Yeah,
a really long time. And I met Patrick through the Free State Project. He spoke at some of our events when I was the chair of the organization. He actually contributed to one of my super PACs. So politically, he's actually very much a libertarian. And but when you dig deep into his stuff, he got a PhD in the philosophy of the U.S. Constitution at Stanford. Like people don't know what his background is. Like he studied in China for a while, then he went to Oxford, then he went to, you don't think of a guy that's like, he's got Overstock.com. You don't think that it's like this guy that did all this other stuff. When Milton Friedman died, on his deathbed, he made Patrick Byrne the chairman of the Free to Choose Foundation. So Patrick he gets liberty, and there's a video that he put together where what he was trying to do with Overstock was he wanted to sell the retail business and go 100% into blockchain. And they made a bunch of investments in blockchain companies. So Overstock actually has like 20 investments in blockchain companies. Ravencoin was kind of the glue working with, at least the vision was to be the glue working with this keiretsu of different blockchain companies that were tackling different problems. And what Patrick described it as is the blockchain tech stack for human civilization. And you think of all of the different, so what does a civilization need? I mean, you need identification systems, you need voting, you need capital markets, you need land title, you need supply chain. So he basically came up with this thesis of saying, listen, you can basically create these hot swappable systems where you can take all of the government corruption and issues that we have right now, move all of it to the blockchain. And he basically set out this vision and built and invested in a portfolio of companies to do that. And Ravencoin was kind of, at least in my view, the go-to blockchain for tokenizing any of these kinds of assets. You can tokenize land. All of the things in the blockchain tech stack for human civilization can be tokenized using Ravencoin. So the vision for Ravencoin and like the roots of Ravencoin are phenomenal and really tied into, again, liberty, this concept of decentralization, but with a real practical application of tackling these human civilization problems by using the blockchain to disintermediate the corrupt third parties. So so to me, I'm like 100% aligned with every aspect of the project. But it's an open source project. They didn't raise money. There was no ICO. Nobody pre-mined it. I mean, it's like Bitcoin in the sense that it doesn't have, all of this other baggage. Which, by the way, the SEC very well might come down and clip shut down half of these crypto projects as being illegal securities. Anybody that did an ICO is at risk of being shut down. We know Ripple's being sued right now, or XRP is being sued right now. A friend of mine runs library.com. I don't know if you're familiar with that. They're being sued by the SEC. It's been a 3-year-long investigation, and now they're being sued. And my understanding from the CEO of Library is that the SEC has probably 20 other cases that they haven't announced yet that they're pursuing. So Ravencoin kind of checks the box of being truly decentralized. It truly is an open source program. You can't shut it down. There's no office. There's nothing to shut down. It's truly a decentralized protocol. So that's why I'm completely gung-ho about it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So when did they fork? What year was it from Bitcoin?
It was 2000, and it's been 3 years.
Okay, 18?
So,
2018?
No, it'll be 4 years in this coming January. So I guess it was 2018.
Okay, so January 2018. Okay. Interesting. So I guess relatively young then, in the grand scheme of things. Wow. So what do you see as sort of like the obstacles to adoption? Is it awareness, or is it something else? I mean,
well, there is adoption happening now. So there are 4 or 5 companies that are actually doing security token offerings on Ravencoin. There's the largest Asian real estate security token offering was done on Ravencoin. There's a $200 million, the largest sapphire in the world is being tokenized and sold using Ravencoin. There's a $35 billion energy project that is doing a security token offering on Ravencoin. I just saw today, I learned for the first time that there's a company that is building houses out of shipping containers. They're doing a security token offering. There's a company, I'm doing an interview with the CEO tomorrow of Vincent Wine. It's one of the Patrick Byrne, one of their investments, that they do wine on the blockchain, where you can actually buy. And I don't know that much about wine, but basically there are a lot of middlemen involved. And what Vincent Wine allows the consumer to do is to be able to buy into a case of wine directly from the vineyard before it's even been harvested and produced. So you can actually track the development of the wine on the blockchain and get a fractional ownership in a case directly from the vineyard. That's one of the things that fits into like the supply chain category. So there's a ton of projects now being developed, and now that we've proven that it works and that you can integrate it with exchanges. So there's the one piece, which is doing a security token offering to begin with, and then it's making those tokens available for sale in the secondary market. And we've done the integration work to be able to do that as well. So that's happening. So the adoption is happening now, which is why I don't know how long I'm going to be doing this, but every week I'm going to I'm going to do a podcast called Ravencoin Proof of Work, where I'm going to interview projects that are being built on Ravencoin, and there are enough of them that I can actually do that now, and to get the word out. So because I want people to understand, I've done a lot of work of trying to get people to think about what you can tokenize. Now I want to show people what's been tokenized, so that you go from abstract to concrete. We're working on Coinbase listing. So right now we're on 35 or 36 exchanges, but we're not on Coinbase, we're not on Gemini, we're not on Kraken. So if that happened, that would be a huge boost for Ravencoin and the awareness. And then there's the issue of, with respect to awareness, there was no ICO, there is no marketing budget. Everything I'm doing, I'm just doing. Like I have no official role with Ravencoin. I'm just an enthusiastic. So anything that you ever see from anyone about Ravencoin is just somebody that's doing it because they like the project. But the fact that there are that many people doing it tells you something about the community. In fact, this guy that is like a huge supporter. South Korea has a huge population that's into Ravencoin. They had a meetup in 2019 with like 1,100 people in person. And one of the guys behind that has actually moved to 3 or 4 different countries over the last 2 years, promoting and talking about Ravencoin. And he was one of the guys that was early into Ethereum in South Korea, and then saw the white paper, and the group that they have there, they're not these people like on TikTok where it's like number go up. These are people that would meet and go through the white paper and have actual like whiteboard sessions to talk about how the technology works. It's a phenomenal thing. So this guy, he goes by Blockchain Tiger on Twitter. He donated a virtual environment for the Ravencoin Foundation. So there's a 3D world that you can go into that has a campus. There's like a concert hall. There are these huge auditoriums. You can have literally 1,000 people in an online 3D conference where people are doing discussions and presenting information about Ravencoin. I've spoken at one of them. And one of the things that happened right away once people saw this environment was like, hey, we should do an auction to raise money for the foundation. So they have a guy, an actual auctioneer, like the guy, the cowboy hat and everything else. So once a week, people go into this 3D virtual environment and they show these NFTs, and the guy comes up and does his little bidding thing and gets all that going. And like, it's incredible. But that was something that was just a guy decided to donate that to the cause. It's a pretty significant expense. And so it's the most incredible community I've ever seen. I've met people from all over the world. I should show you, I mean, some of my Twitter DMs, like it's amazing. And to me, like this whole concept of learning that we talk about and just kind of like seeing where things go, I'm being exposed to different cultures and just meeting different people and learning about different perspectives just through this. Like you could make an entire life just out of like meeting with people in the community that are attached and passionate about this project. The people from Turkey, like literally all over the world. It's an incredible thing for an open source protocol that has no fundraising behind it. It's phenomenal.
Wow, that is super cool. It is definitely fun to be part of a growing community. Absolutely. So let me ask, if people listening want to learn more about Ravencoin and be a part of the community and keep up to date on what's happening and what companies are doing what sources do you recommend they check out? Obviously, they can follow you on Twitter. That's a big thing. And
they can follow me on Twitter, but I would go to ravencoin.org because that's kind of a launch pad that links to, because there are a lot of different tools. Like there's a Discord group, there's a Telegram group, there's a Facebook group. I mean, it's just like, and again, it's all decentralized. But ravencoin.org is one place for it. And now there's a Ravencoin Foundation that's been formed. And it's a nonprofit, and we've been doing these NFT auctions and people have been donating to it. So that is a group. So people can look up Ravencoin Foundation as well. And that's another great source. Kind of, I hate to say official because there isn't an official source. And even the Ravencoin Foundation is not official, but yet at the same time, the lead developer of Ravencoin is the president of the Ravencoin Foundation. So I consider it to be, like that's where I go first to find out what's actually going on. But one of the things that was kind of great, I used to know everything that was going on with Ravencoin, like for 2 years. And I mean, and I've done stuff like I did the first mobile wallet token transfer. I bought a piece of silver from a guy in South Korea, like 2.5 years ago or something, 2 years ago. I did the first mobile transaction. I've like experimented. I play around with all this stuff, and I had a pretty good handle of what was going on. There's so much going on right now. I don't think I have a clue of a fraction of what's going on. But to make things even more interesting, this energy company, $35 billion energy company that has a deal with Ethiopia or whatever. It's an Australian company working on an Ethiopian clean energy project or whatever. They're doing a security token offering. Tron Black didn't even know about it. So it's really like it's getting out there. And the thing that you'll find people, there's this woman who's written songs and she sings songs about Ravencoin. Like people get really, really into this. To me, it's a phenomenal thing just to be a part of. But everybody's really united in it. Somebody actually did a poll about this. Like most of the people have been holding Ravencoin for 3 years. Like people have been committed to the project. They've remained in the project. It has a lot of there are people that come in and they want to speculate or whatever, and then they'll get upset if the price doesn't go up, as much as Dogecoin in 1 week or whatever, and then they'll get angry about it or whatever. But Ravencoin was 1 cent like 4 months ago. It went from like 1 cent to 26 cents. And then it's back down a little bit as well. But it's been quite a ride. And then for me, like I said, I dumped my whole net worth into it, and I'm not selling. Like it's not, the whole point of it isn't to convert it to fiat. But most of the time I've been in it, it's been underwater until recently. So but yeah, Ravencoin.org, Ravencoin Foundation. And I encourage people to download a wallet and try to create a token. Like I'm not sitting here saying, "Oh, go buy it," whatever. Go do what I did and pump your whole net worth into it. Use it. Check out the community. It's the community. If people have support issues or anything. I mean, again, there's no marketing budget. There's no customer service, but yet, if anybody has a problem, you will be able to get it addressed very quickly. The community is incredibly supportive. And some of the people are just truly dedicated to it. So that's, to me, I don't see that with a lot of other crypto projects at all.
For sure. Well, that's awesome. That's very, very cool. And I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about Salucorp one more time and give you a chance to talk about what you're doing and why you're on Ravencoin, and what your vision is for your company and who your customers are and so forth. So, do you want to take a minute and kind of talk about your company? And
so Salu isn't doing anything. So I after investigating, trying to apply blockchain technology in healthcare, I realized that the problem isn't technical. The problem is political. And so what I ended up doing instead, as I started looking at blockchain alternatives, because part of this was well, look, if I wanted to do, you could do. I looked at Ethereum in 2017, and I realized you couldn't use Ethereum. You can't imagine trying to use Ethereum tokens to handle healthcare transactions. What are you going to do? Go in and get a flu shot, which I wouldn't recommend, but whatever. Go in and get a flu shot and pay $400 in gas fees. And so then that's when I stumbled into Ravencoin. I'm like, wait a minute, I can create a token. It's scalable. The transaction fees are almost zero. So that's actually how I originally got into it. And then started mining Ravencoin, built a couple of rigs and everything else. And so Salu is really just kind of, it's mined some Ravencoin, and it's there. I can do something with it at some point. I haven't figured out what I necessarily want to do with it yet. I may repurpose it. I do have some project ideas that I'm pursuing, but I'm kind of researching. There's some specific areas that I think Ravencoin could be really interesting for. It's funny. You think about this whole blockchain tech stack idea, right? And you have different crypto projects that are going to different countries trying to, implement this technology. And of course, what people don't realize is that the people that are in political power aren't looking for efficiency and accountability and an auditable ledger for all of their transactions. That's just not how politics works. But it's kind of but what if you applied a blockchain tech stack for human civilization in a virtual environment? So what if you created a Second Life, but where you had the systems in this infrastructure within a virtual world. This is what I'm playing with this right now. I don't know. I can't explain how it would work yet, but this is one thing that's occurred to me is, you could form a corporation in Delaware. Why not form a corporation in a decentralized virtual environment? Why couldn't a decentralized virtual community be a legitimate sovereign nation with its own functions that are on the blockchain? So I've been toying with that. So that's where my thinking is right now. But in the meantime, I'm just going to continue exploring, other projects, and I've met with a lot of people and helping out other projects where I can and connecting people. That's what I'm doing in the interim.
Yeah, when you mentioned the digital world and all that comes with it, I can't help but think of an idea I've been playing around with every now and then, which is basically like an actual sovereign nation without any physical land that could issue passports.
Yep.
So, right now, you basically have to, if you're a human being on planet Earth, you basically, for the most part, have to have a passport from a nation state, one of about 200 of them. But why not have a country that has no land and issues passports? And, they probably would not have an army because they would have nothing to defend, and they probably wouldn't start wars or enter wars, and so on. And so I think through that as a thought experiment. I'm not actually doing anything with it, but I don't know. Have you encountered that or heard other people think of that? Or
I did 3 or 4 years ago. I remember I was on a call with somebody that was pursuing something like that, but I don't know where it went. I haven't heard about it since, but that fits into what I'm talking about, because that's part of the blockchain tech stack is the identity system, right? Identity is one of the categories. It's one of the categories that Patrick Byrne invested in. So you could be part of this virtual world. You have your own identity. You have a reputation management system. You have capital markets. You have all of this stuff in this virtual world. And part of what I got there through a lot of different steps, but I'm like, when you look at things, a lot of this is like watching my son. I'm like, where is he spending his time? He will spend as much of his available time on Roblox as possible. And what is he doing? Like when I saw the editor, when he took that class, it's like they're sitting there creating the environment. They're
it's so loud.
They're creating the landscape. They're like determining how long the days are going to be, putting in lakes and all this other stuff. We're truly creating a virtual environment, and he spends 100% of his discretionary money on digital currency. Well, what do we think is going to happen 5 years from now, 10 years from now? He's probably going to be spending half or more of his time in the blur between augmented reality, virtual reality, and everything else. And so you could actually, if you look at the number of people that play these massive online games or that are on Roblox or everything else, you could create a virtual world that's bigger than almost every country on Earth. I mean, it literally could be something that an environment that has its own GDP that's an actual powerhouse. So with that said, there's a lot to do to build something like that out. But I've studied Second Life, and there's actually a movie on Netflix about Second Life. And they showcase like 4 different people that like essentially spend like 12 or 14 hours a day in Second Life. And they had this one woman who literally earned her living in Second Life. She designed virtual clothing and shoes and was making like $100,000 a year in Second Life. And this was like 8 years ago or something.
Wow.
In the end, she had to stop because people were coming in and ripping off, just cutting and pasting her stuff and not paying her for it. And there was a lot of counterfeiting and all that other stuff. So what occurred to me, it's like, well, wait a minute, if you had these assets on the blockchain, you could actually solve that problem. But Second Life literally had people really living and spending more of their time in that virtual world and earning money in that world and spending money in that world. And so that's what's gotten me to think about, well, wait, maybe we really could rebuild something like Second Life, but with a blockchain tech stack underlying all of these different things that would solve some of the things that I think crippled Second Life in the end. So so this is the thing that I'm really passionate about right now, but there's so much to explore. And to be honest, I think if it did work, Ravencoin would have to work on scale. We'd have to work on scalability really quickly, because that's one of those things that would eat a lot of transactions, right? I mean, if you're running if you're essentially running all of the functions of a virtual country on a blockchain, that would eat up quite a bit of the block space. So that's another thing to consider. But I'm very intrigued by this idea, because just when I watch my kids, and there's no. I mean, you look at what's going on in the Middle East. If you look at what's going on, almost anywhere, I don't know of any place that's got a particularly stable political situation right now. I mean, Europe has got all kinds of different issues. You've got people, whether they're protesting over lockdowns or economic hardships, Turkey devaluing the thing. China has all kinds of human rights issues. Taiwan, it's really so. But rather than say, well, how do we fix this, or try to naively think that these broken systems are going to adopt blockchain technology, just say, you know what? We'll just switch. I'm now a sovereign citizen of this virtual environment, and anybody in the world can be, and can do trade and have free speech. And, education, this is another area, obviously, where, as you know, as you've experienced, you really can't, the system doesn't allow you to innovate in education. It's just very, very locked down. But I mean, imagine what you could actually do in a virtual environment for education for anybody anywhere. So that's why Ravencoin can do that.
Yeah, it's a super exciting future. I mean, it's really exciting to be a part of, and I'm just excited to see where things go. I'm wondering, thinking of nationalities and so forth. I recently discovered the Nomad Capitalist YouTube channel and book, Andrew Henderson. I'm not sure if you're familiar. Yeah, super interesting. And he basically, he renounced his U.S. citizenship a few years ago, and he even prior to that, he had been living around the world for many years. Basically, I was just going to ask you if you've ever thought about your citizenship. I know obviously you live in New Hampshire, part of the Free State Project, but have you ever thought about renouncing your citizenship or anything in that regard, in terms of just moving in different parts of the world?
I've done all of that, and being a Ayn Rand person, the idea of having a gulch is always that's been a thing I've been talking about since I was a teenager. And there was one point where I've even gone down the path of, what if you could go in with some people and buy an island and investigate? I've investigated all of that stuff, and in the end, I ended up picking New Hampshire and the Free State Project because it seemed like, all things being equal, it was the best thing to do. With that said, I haven't found any place better. But New Hampshire's not great like that. New Hampshire has, as I said at the very beginning, the federal government is increasing control over the state, and the budget is growing out of control. And so there are a lot of people that say, well, New Hampshire's going to secede, and it's that's not how the population. There's no part of that that's actually viable. But a good friend of mine moved to Puerto Rico. Because Puerto Rico had this thing where you basically could have all these tax breaks and everything else, and he was down there for 6 months, and he got out. It is a no-go. Puerto Rico is a absolute no-go. Between the earthquakes and the hurricanes and the infrastructure problems and crime, and then it sounds like they might be going back on some of the tax stuff, and the government's corrupt. But I was looking at that. I was actually, at the end of 2019, I would have told you there was probably a 50-50 chance I was going to go to Puerto Rico and hang out with my friend. And then COVID hit, and then he moved back. And so it's kind of so Puerto Rico's off. But I've looked at Panama. A friend of mine has a place in Panama, but he's also still here in New Hampshire. I put that one on the list. What's hard for me though is, I have 10-year-old twins, and so that I don't see. This is a great place for them to be growing up as kids. I have not seen anything that's more compelling for raising kids. So I'm always looking, but I don't see that happening. So probably for 6 or 8 years or so, I'll be sticking here. But I'm going to continue to investigate options. We'll see how bad it gets here, right? I mean, this hyperinflation, we're going into uncharted territory here. I don't think people are aware of what's going to happen. I've been trying to learn about this stuff for a while. In fact, I did a series of videos, 12 videos a year ago. And I was telling people, financial collapse coming, censorship is coming. This is before YouTube and everything else, because I would post stuff about COVID and it would just get taken down. Like, when they were first going out and saying, don't get masks, and then they switched their policy and everything else. And I was sharing information about the fact that they're not competently running this whole process. And they would delete it. Not a lot of it. I mean, a lot of the stuff came up, but then Twitter even changed their terms of service to say that they can remove your content in your account for basically objecting to public health officials, even if you're right. And so that's one of the applications of blockchain. So I did a whole series of videos on alternatives to Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, email, Gmail, all that other stuff. So I did a series of videos on that. I did a thing on Ravencoin. So I'm constantly, evaluating and looking for new things. But I've been telling people for more than a year. But hardcore, I used to go with the soft, sell approach, where it's like you try to sit down with somebody and say. And now I'm just like, don't fiat buy crypto. There's not enough time left at this point, right? Where it's just like I don't have 4 hours to go through and walk this. The building is burning. Decide what you want to do, because they'll confiscate your money. They'll do all this stuff, and I think it's going to get bad. I think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. So, but that's necessary.
Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I've been telling people for years, ever since I figured it out. I'm like, this pretty much has to end badly. So figure out what I'm talking about, do your own research, and get prepared. So we'll see. But yeah, I mean, the hyperinflation has absolutely started. Like, we're definitely at that kink in the hockey stick chart where we're going to double digits and there's no turning back, not until the currency collapses. So yeah, like you said.
I mean, even before this shortage, gas went up 30%. Milk went up. I buy organic milk. It went from like $5.99 a gallon to $7.99 a gallon. Like, and this isn't even Whole Foods. This is like a normal grocery store. Like, this has all happened this year, even before people are now talking about this. I'm like, 1.5% inflation. Now, the only thing that I will say that remains fascinating is that somehow technology products seem to be still going down in price. Like, that's amazing what happens when a market is relatively unregulated, but everything else is just it's obscene. And so it's kind of like some of these DeFi things, you can earn 60%, annual percentage yield and all this other stuff. I'm like, I don't even know if that's going to keep up with inflation.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I always love technology because like it's like exponentially exponential in the sense that like one generation of technology can be used to invent the next generation of technology, which is super cool. Like, once you have a computer, you can use that to invent something like a blockchain and so on. But like food and so forth, it's not like today's gallon of milk can somehow be used to invent a better milk tomorrow. It doesn't quite work like that. So
no, it doesn't. But one of the things that is interesting is like the convergence of AI and 3D printing. I think I saw that a Kentucky Fried Chicken in Russia they're going to start printing chicken nuggets this year.
What?
Yeah. There's 3D printed meat. And there's all kind like the amount of stuff that is going on. And I was gonna recommend a book that I'm almost done reading right now that is absolutely fantastic, and I think you would appreciate it because it really touches on a lot of the different areas that we've been going through here. The Future is Faster Than You Think.
Okay.
By Peter Diamandis and Stephen Kotler.
Oh, did they also write Bold?
Yes.
Okay.
This is the newest one.
Okay.
This will blow your mind when you like go through and hear the update on where we are with self-driving cars, flying cars, AI is applied to medicine, life expansion and everything else. Like, this stuff it's not like we're sitting here talking about this might be possible. This is actually happening now. People are testing flying cars. The self-driving car thing is actually made, I think in Phoenix, Waymo has completely self-driving cars, a pilot program now. So when you start thinking about things like this and the ability to print food and like the intersection of this. This is why it really, I had to say to myself, as somebody who's always been like a diehard Ayn Rand capitalist, which most of that is based on scarcity. I mean, most of the entire belief system is based on scarcity. But the reality is we're reaching a point where scarcity may really not be an issue. And if that's the case, you have to let go of the system that you have and the thinking that you have around the other thing. I don't know where you go with that. I don't know where that ends up, but it's that big of a transformation. I mean, when they're 3D printing food, and you can already 3D print guns and everything else, a couple more iterations of that, and in VR, like it just like the last couple of iterations of VR headsets, that stuff is becoming pretty indistinguishable. And there are all these like haptic suits and different things that you can get for smell and like stimulating all of the different senses. Like that stuff's real now. Like you can that stuff now. And so like what are things going to be like not 20 years, not 10 years, like 2 to 5 years from now, literally everything could be different.
Wow. It's so insane. I'll definitely check out that book. That sounds awesome. Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I mean, I can't believe like how awesome this was. So many topics I wasn't even expecting to cover is amazing.
No, I love it because you give me an opportunity to talk about stuff that I just haven't talked. We'll see how it goes. We'll see what the reaction to it is. But I'm interested in a lot of the stuff and I don't talk about it. And I'd like to talk about it more. Hopefully this is a good starting point for it.
For sure. And like we could go like any 30-second clip from this discussion, we could go and talk for 5 hours about. Like it's unbelievable. Actually, I did want to ask you, going backwards a little bit. You mentioned that you kind of went down these rabbit holes and you've done different things without any expectation of what happens and no particular goal in mind. That really summarizes nicely the philosophy behind the surrender experiment. Have you read that book, The Surrender Experiment? Michael Singer? Oh my goodness. It might be my favorite book now. I'm
sorry. I'm writing that down.
Yeah, Surrender Experiment, Michael A. Singer. Super good. I mean, it's exactly what you said. He basically just experimented with surrendering, and he just went through life without really having any goals, and just did what the universe put in front of him and sort of trusted his intuition. And, even when it like required him to do something that sounded difficult or boring or frustrating or whatever, he just did it anyway and had this beautiful life as a result. And the book is about doing that for 40 years and like what happened to him. It is like so powerful.
It's funny you mentioned that. The first book that my wife recommended to me when I went on this journey, like when I departed from New Hampshire to Florida, like I was going to read these business books, like it was going to be like all the tech books, right? This is my normal process. This is my spreadsheet. This is the normal stuff that I was going to do. I threw that all away, and I'm like, all right, what should I read? And so the first book she recommended is called Letting Go by David Hawking. So it's similar with this idea of the surrender experiment, letting go. That's exactly what this entire book is about. So my whole starting point in going into this new material was based on like this idea of letting go. So that they're really that it's hugely transformational doing that.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing. Well, again, thank you so much. I don't want to take any more of your time. So if people want to get in touch with you, obviously there's Twitter. I'll put your handle in the description. Is there any other place you want to point people to get in touch with you? Is your podcast, did you launch it already, or is that coming up soon?
No, I'm doing the first one tomorrow. And it will be on, I'll probably put it on YouTube as well, but I'm going to have it on Odyssey, which is now, Library is now Odyssey. So I'm going to put it there. I'll probably also put it on YouTube. I mean, my email address is daylight2020@protonmail.com if anybody wants to email me. But Twitter seems to be the, kind of the go-to place. I mean, I'm on all different social channels, but that's where I spend the bulk of my time at this point.
Awesome. Well, I'll put those links in the description, and thank you so much. We definitely have to have a follow-up in the future. So thank you so much.
I agree. All right. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, Aaron. You too. Take care.